everyone. Welcome to the program. This is Sunday Politics live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimaloye in Abuja. Tonight is a special edition owing to the series of events in our country. And today we woke up to President Bola Tinubu addressing the nation. We shall be spending the next 2 hours to dissect all of these issues and give you also citizens' perspectives, well-meaning Nigerians, and of course statesmen who are already speaking up about it. Government is also going to be telling us how to arrest the food inflation and the shortage that is being perceived to be happening, and of course some of the issues relating to food inflation. So sit tight, everyone. It's going to be a bumper package. Well, good evening. Over the past 4 days, Nigeria has witnessed intense street protests and agitation under the banner of End Bad Governance. These demonstrations have in many ways drawn the attention of the government and the world to the yearnings of the average Nigerians and the plight of the poor and the vulnerable in our society. The protests in some ways have crippled the economy, bringing a majority of economic activities to a standstill. Nigerians woke up this morning to an early day address by President Bola Tinubu, which has sparked a wave of reactions. While some are calling for an end to the protest, arguing that dialogue is the way forward, the organizers insist the protest will continue and the demands of the protesters have not been met. Many protesters remain steadfast, vowing to continue until their grievances are fully addressed. Let me quickly give you a roundup of what has happened today in selected parts of the country. In Lagos, for example, Nigeria's commercial nerve center, a small group of the End Bad Governance protesters gathered around the Gani Park, chanting solidarity songs shortly after President Bola Tinubu's address to the nation. The protesters said that the president has not addressed the core issues raised by them, despite touching on effort by his administration. Policemen and other security agencies were still on the ground at the park, but the police barred the protesters from holding a procession beyond the designated ground at the Gani Park, Ojota. The protesters complied without argument and returned to the designation point. But at some point earlier in the day, some hoodlums chased the protesters who gathered around the Gani Park in the Ojota area of Lagos out of the arena. And early in the morning, a major disagreement played out amongst the organizers of the protest in the Ojota area of Lagos, where a lawyer who simply identified himself as JP came to address the protesters to leave the protest grounds, on the basis that President Bola Tinubu has addressed the nation. But another group led by a 70-year-old Adegboyega Adeniji of the Peace Action Transformation insisted on remaining on the protest ground until further notice. And in Abuja, the nation's capital, the popular MKO Abiola Stadium was deserted as streets deserted with scanty vehicular movement, but the stadium environment was heavily guarded by security operatives. Let me now take you to Jos in Plateau State, where Prophet Issa El Buba led the protesters in a peaceful march on the fourth day of the protest, where after they held a service on the protest grounds. Well, from the streets, let's take you to what happened very early this morning. President Bola Tinubu at about 7 a.m. addressed the nation in over 20-minute long broadcast. The president asked the protesters to return home. He equally condemned the activities of those who destroyed private properties and public infrastructure. However, President Tinubu ruled out the return of subsidy on PMS film, popularly known as petrol. Let me remind you of some of the key things the president said in that address. First, he condemned the destruction of property. Take a listen.
I am especially pained by the loss of lives in Borno, Jigawa, Kano, Kaduna, and other states the destruction of facilities in some states, and the wanton looting of supermarkets and shops, contrary to the promise of protest organizers that the protest will be peaceful across the country. The destruction of properties set us back as a nation, as scarce resources will be again used to restore them. I commiserate with the families and relations of those who have died in the protest.
All right. The president also said that dialogue should be the way forward in resolving some of these issues.
I enjoin protesters and the organizers to suspend any further protest and create room for dialogue, which I have always acceded to at the slightest opportunity. Nigeria requires all hands on deck and need us all, regardless of age, party, tribe, religion, or other divides. So threaten any section of this country, be warned. The law will catch up with you. There is no place for ethnic bigotry or such threats in the Nigeria we seek to build.
Perhaps a major aspect of the president's address that a lot of the agitators, protesters, and a lot of Nigerians wanted to hear is about the fuel subsidy. They're asking that the president should revert reverse the policy on the removal of fuel subsidy. Let me remind you of what the president said in that respect.
Just over a year ago, our dear country, Nigeria, reached a point where we couldn't afford to continue the use of temporary solutions to solve long-term problems for the sake of now and our unborn generations. I therefore took the painful yet necessary decision to remove fuel subsidy and abolish multiple foreign exchange systems, which had constituted a noose around the economic jugular of our nation. These decisions are made were necessary if we must reverse the decades of economic mismanagement that didn't serve us well.
There was a promise by the president in that address that infrastructure, they are quickly working on infrastructure to get the economy working. But let me take you straight to the point where the president said he has heard the protesters, and the manner in which he has heard them, is it low or unclear? Take a listen to him.
My dear Nigerians, especially our youths, I have heard you loud and clear. I understand the pain and the frustration that drive these protests, and I want to assure you that our government is committed to listening and addressing the concerns of our citizens. The economy is recovering. Please, don't shut out this oxygen.
Right. You heard the president. I told you it's an almost 20-minute long address. You can still watch it on our YouTube page and go on Channel Television's website for you to get a breakdown of what the president said. But there have been a series of reactions to the president's Sunday morning broadcast. Let me allow you to look at what a human rights activist and lawyer, Mr. Femi Falana, said. He has called on President Bola Tinubu to address the demands of the peaceful protesters. In a statement, Mr. Falana says a presidential speech delivered this morning falls short of addressing the key demand of the protesters. Reversal of the policy of withdrawal of fuel subsidy. He went further to say, quote, if the government takes the fight against corruption to oil dealers and crude oil is processed in government-owned refineries, there will be no basis for fuel subsidy, which is induced by the importation of petroleum products, a positive response to the key demand of the youth to review to review the protesters could make them review their actions. Insensitivity to their demands can only provoke continued action. End of quote. Now, from Falana to the presidential candidate of the PDP in the 2023 election and the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar is equally reacted. His media aide released a statement earlier today. That's Paul Ibe. In that statement, he says, "Has called the president low." He described the speech of the president as hollow and fails to address the hardship of Nigerians. Atiku says, quote, "This address lacks credibility and fails to offer any immediate, tangible solutions to the Nigerian people, given the extensive publicity surrounding the protests and the threats issued by government officials against demonstrators. One would have expected President Tinubu to present groundbreaking reforms, particularly those aimed at reducing the exorbitant cost of governance. But alas, no such announcements were made. The president ignored the protesters' demands, such as suspending the purchase of aircraft for the president, downsizing his bloated cabinet, or even eliminating the costly and burdensome office of the First Lady, who has been indulging in extravagant trips at the nation's expense." End of quote. Now, Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka is particularly worried about the civil engagement of the protesters and the security agencies. He has condemned the manner in which the security agencies handled the protesters. Professor Soyinka, in a piece he titled "The Hunger March as Universal Mandate," says, quote, "The nation's security agencies cannot pretend unawareness of alternative models for emulation, civilized advances in security intervention. The time is long overdue, surely, to abandon permanently the anachronistic resort to lethal means by the security agencies of governance. No nation is so underdeveloped, materially impoverished, or simply internally insecure as to lack the will to set an example. All it takes is to recall its own history, then exercise the will to commence a lasting transformation, inserting a break in the chain of lethal responses against civic society. One way or the other, this vicious cycle must be broken." End of quote. In part, what Professor Wole Soyinka said in his piece. Let's make sense of all of this, shall we? Let's get some insight into what the president said in that address and get some perspective on the messaging and what this exactly means for Nigeria. I'm being joined by the presidential candidate of the ADC in the 2023 election, Mr. Dumebi Kachiku, who joins us live here in our Abuja studio. Thank you so much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
You were expecting that speech. A lot of Nigerians were expecting. Some set their alarm clock. Some moved their service, first service to second service. Christians who go to early service just to watch the president. Were you disappointed in that speech?
I didn't expect better. I've watched the president make a series of speeches in the last 14 months, and it's obvious that his speech writers write a speech that they believe will evoke emotions, but don't particularly speak to the realities of our situation as Nigerians. And the president goes out and makes this speech. There's a difference between the speech that has been written and the speech that has been delivered. Sometimes the delivery says a lot, you know. I didn't see in the body language of the president today a man who was agitated about what's happened in the last 1 week. The president of a country has lost 19 of his citizenry to bloody protest, where businesses have been shuttered and what have you. I didn't see in that body language. I just saw a man reading a prepared speech. And this is what I noticed from his speech today. And if you look at it again, at a lot of things he mentioned in that speech, you will see he talked about the vexatious issue of fuel subsidy. Now, when you look at fuel subsidy and remember of fuel subsidy, I've heard in the last week or two, a lot of people have said that all candidates in the last election said they removed subsidy. I disagree. I never said that. What we said was that fuel subsidy could be suspended for a minimum period of 3 months whilst we put in place a fraud-proof subsidy scheme. You cannot take away subsidy from a nation that God has endowed with precious natural resources such as oil and gas. It makes no sense. So you take away subsidy from petroleum products, you take away subsidy on power, and you ask the people to then do what? So Nigerians are suffering at an all-time high, even though we concede that the former president sets the stage for what we are experiencing now. But this president could have taken a different approach. I think subsidy removal, which was not done by him, was an own goal. In his first speech as president of Nigeria, in his maiden address when he was being sworn in, the president said, "I will remove subsidy." But that was not true. You are aware that President Buhari didn't put any budget for subsidy in the last year's budget. So the president ought to have said, "I've come to meet a situation where there's no subsidy, there's no budget for subsidy. I might provide for this in the supplementary budget, or we'll look at how to make this scheme better." But like a cowboy, he took on that burden, that difficult job to say, "I remove subsidy," whereas he didn't remove subsidy.
So you think it was a wrong decision?
It's absolutely
What
a wrong
about
decision.
almost a decade or more agitation and those experts, well meaning Nigerians, who have said the subsidy is a scam and it's a way, although the president has said, it's one of the nooses around our economy, strangling the economy and allowing the few to benefit while the large majority of our nation, of our people in our nation, suffer. They cannot get the benefit of it.
So is Nigeria a banana republic? What do you mean that you have a few people abuse a system and they cannot be arrested or prosecuted? What are we talking about here? These people are less than 1,000 people, steal trillions of naira, and nobody has been arrested or prosecuted. And then you make 200 million Nigerians suffer for what God has given to them. How does that begin to make sense?
So you do not agree with the president?
I absolutely disagree with the subsidy removal. He shouldn't have done that. They remove subsidy on power.
So how do you then align the fact that there is no budget for it? And how do you cope as a president, as a government, when there are no provisions for the payment of
That's
subsidy?
why you have supplementary budget. Then you budget for it. That was last year's budget, right? You budget for it. Does this make sense? Look, he removed subsidy, or he announced that subsidy has been removed. He had a supplementary budget. He didn't cater for subsidy. Then you come and say to Nigerians, "Guess what, guys? I'm going to give you student loans. You take my money from me and you loan it back to me. I will give you credit schemes where you get money to buy electronics, whatever you want to buy. My money and you loan it back to me." How does that begin to make sense? Then you see how subsidy has affected every single thing. Inflation at an all-time high, double digits going to 30%, 40% in Nigeria. What they're telling us is in the low 20s, but trust me, it's over 30s. How does a nation grapple with this? Tell you what, Shane, we are an import-dependent nation. When the president came in, was sworn as president, the cost of clearing one container of a 40-foot container was about 5 or 6 million naira. You know what the cost is today? Around 20 million naira in an import-dependent nation. So you will say you want to tackle inflation, and you have such a situation where everything we use in Nigeria is being imported and you're paying that much. How won't you have inflation in Nigeria? So this president keeps on scoring own goals. But she will tell you what. Do I really blame this president? Absolutely not. I blame his handlers. I will tell you, listening to the president during the debates or the so-called debates that we had, you get the sense that President Tinubu is one of the smartest presidents we've had. He knows what needs to be done. He understands what the issues are. But being governor of Lagos State, being a leader of APC is totally different from being president of Nigeria. The myriad issues we have facing us as a nation is not something you come and tackle as like a leader of APC.
So you imagine that there is a Bola Tinubu that has the personality, the heart, and the skill set to be able to fix Nigeria's problem?
Absolutely. Trust me. He's a progressive at heart. So you see in some of the policies he's trying to bring on board and all those things, he's a progressive at heart.
So that's a good element of
absolutely.
But unfortunately for you, what you're trying to drive at is that the policies are not in tandem with what is supposed to be the possible solution for our problems.
Correct. So you have the progressive president on one hand, and you have the Emilocon president on the other hand. So these two personalities are in conflict with each other. The Emilocon president is the one who came and assumed the toga of removing subsidy, whereas he didn't remove subsidy. The local president is the one who came and allowed a situation after removing subsidy to then remove the subsidy on power. That does not make any sense. We've heard Nigerians complain about the appointments that were made, and 70-80% of those appointments went to his kit and cane. How do you, after an election like the one we had last year, there's no election that divided Nigerians like that ever. And what you should do as a president when you come on board is to seek to bring Nigerians together. Tell you what, after the Supreme Court judgment, if I were the president, to assuage the feelings of Nigerians, the first thing I would have done would have been to have removed the INEC chairman. Do you know what that would have done to the people who felt that the elections did not meet the litmus test of credibility? The president did not do that. Listen to his speech again today, where people are protesting. If you see the protests in the UK, you see people are looting. So in America, when you see protests, you see people loot. So you always have these people looting
in France, the same thing.
In France, the same thing, and all those things. So those are not the real issues. We understand that we worry about protests in Nigeria because you are likely to have, because of the religious ethnic sentiments of Nigeria, it could lead to anarchy or full-blown civil war. We worry about that, yes. But what is the real issue? The issue is the removal of subsidy and the fact that Nigerians are suffering. Shehu, if you're not suffering, I am suffering. A lot of people are suffering, right? But the issue is it came from removal of subsidy. What does it take for this president to say, guess what, guys? I will suspend this subsidy removal for the next 3 months. And let's review that whole scheme. And I'll bring the best brains from across party lines. And let's come up with a foolproof scheme, a fraud-proof scheme that serves or caters to all Nigerians.
So are you saying that, that established notion that subsidy has to go pre the election was a scam also, because the articles of this world, the Peter Obis of this world, and several other candidates, including the president as the APC candidate, all believe that subsidy, when they get into office, they will remove it. So you are saying that that notion is incorrect.
I'm happy you mentioned Atiku, Peter Obi, and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. You are talking about an old generation who see things differently. The reality is that if you understand what the people of this generation understand, you know it's the easiest thing to ensure that that subsidy scheme is fraud-proof. It's very easy. With technology, with the right policy, you can make it fraud-proof and ensure that Nigerians don't suffer.
So you are saying that subsidy should remain?
Absolutely.
What about
yes.
the scam around it?
The scam, tell you what, Shemu, do you know if this president came and said, you know what, in the first 3 months, I'm going to go after everyone who's been involved in subsidy scam?
But you operate in that sector. You know the kind of difficulties over the years that we have experienced. I remember Senator Bukola Saraki raising this, which was one of the agitations which started on the floor of the Senate that led to that uprising in the country at that time, where the Occupy protest, was majorly in Lagos and in several parts of the country. And all of these years of argument about subsidy not saying, you are now clamoring that subsidy is the way to go.
Sheon, imagine this situation. You have a few people who make away with trillions of naira. They have enough money to form any government, to put any governor in power. And that's what these guys are doing. And that's why people are scared of them. But I imagine...
So they are
a cabal.
The money is enormous.
A very rich cabal. But I imagine that a big boy President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will not be influenced by this cabal. He will go after these people. He will write his name in the annals of our history as a progressive president who did what nobody else could do.
If you say that these people are cabal, they have deep pocket, they have a lot of money, they could do anything they want to do because they have the money. And the president said, I will stifle their further plundering of our economy. Isn't that one way of doing it? Could it also be that these are the people that are making sure that things does not work because their source of livelihood has been taken away from them?
So what you are saying to them is this. For the last 15 years, you guys have made 15, 20 trillion, 30 trillion naira, right? Go with your stolen loot. I will now impoverish Nigerians. I will make Nigerians suffer for what you've stolen. That's what the president seems to be saying.
So you're saying that the president should go after the subsidy cabals?
That's what...
Who are these people? Is it possible that the nation unveils their identity?
Trust me on this. They know who these people are. These people are amongst us. So when you watch a situation where you go into Lagos and see skyscrapers are not being financed by any banks and what have you, and you say you don't know where this, everybody knows. It's the most open secret that we know in Nigeria here. Go after these people.
I did also the oil thieves.
Of course, they're part of the oil thieves. It's one sector. So they continue to loot Nigeria blind. And you keep them, you leave them, and you say 200 million Nigerians should suffer. Absolutely not. The president must reverse course. The president must go after these people and let Nigerians breathe. That's what this president must do. He cannot say that Nigerians should suffer whilst the subsidy thieves go scot-free. How does that begin to make sense? Now, tell you what, Shehu, if you understand the level of hardship in Nigeria and the cumulative effect, the vicious circle, everything. Rent in Abuja is now going to some places 70 million, 80 million per annum. In the suburbs there, you cannot get a 2-bedroom now for less than 1.5 million naira. You cannot buy tomatoes, you cannot buy onions, you cannot buy rice. All because a wrong decision was taken. And you said that this is easier for you to do than go after less than 1,000 people. What's EFCC doing? What's ICPC doing? What's SFU doing? What's police doing? We're not a banana republic.
How dangerous is it to break this cabal?
We have the law on our side. We have the law
Can
on our side.
Can we start by identifying these people?
That is what...
Let the name and shaming begin and let Nigerians know who are these people. Is it possible?
Exactly. But tell you what, Shehu, the law stipulates what must be done to people who abuse our laws. They should be prosecuted. The government knows these people. Don't ignore these people. Go after them. That's what will save his government.
All right, just give me a moment. Let me turn to a lawyer and rights activist, Mr. Samson Itodo, who is the Executive Director of Yaga Africa. He joins us virtually. Thank you so much, Mr. Itodo, for joining us. I've spoken to you about this protest. Now the president has spoken on the 4th day of the protest. What do you make of the president's speech today?
Well, thank you very much, Sean, and good evening to Nigerians wherever they are in part of the world. Well, the president has spoken, but Nigerians are disappointed that the president's statement this morning failed the expectations of Nigerians. That there was jubilation when it was announced that the president was going to speak to the Nigerian people for whom he holds power and trust on their behalf. But his speech was a missed opportunity. And it was a missed opportunity for 3 things, because there were 3 things that we all expected the president was going to address. The first one was that the president would directly respond to the demands that the protesters have made. Principal amongst them is the issue around cutting the cost of governance, is the issue around human capital development, is the issue around constitutional reforms, but also improving the cost, of living. And I thought that a presidential address of this nature would have taken, if not all the 10 issues, but take the key issues around the cost of living, issues around cutting down the cost of governance, issues around accountability. But that was not addressed.
Is there any positive for you, Samson, in that speech?
No, I will come to that. And that's what I was going to say, that while the president recognized the fact that, there were fatalities, in this protest, which, to a large extent, you commend him for doing that. But he failed to express his commitment to holding those people to account. Because there were Nigerians whose lives were lost. Yes, it's good to commiserate with the families. But what about holding the people who killed Nigerians, in the course of this protest to account? And I'm very, very sad and disappointed that the protesters who were very peaceful, are being held responsible, for the hijack, the hoodlums that invaded the protest. It's just sad. But also the fact that there were over 600 Nigerians who were arrested as a result of this protest. I thought that the president would have used this opportunity, to ask the security agencies to release the protesters. And these are innocent protesters who were unharmed. I'm not referring to criminals who chose to leverage this opportunity of those protests for criminality purposes. Those individuals to face the wrath of the law. But for the protesters who were very peaceful, who were only asking for a better deal from their leaders, it is unfair to those people that they were attacked. Some of them were shot at, including journalists who we have reported life experiences where they were intimidated, assaulted by security agencies. And if you attack journalists who were performing their responsibility of protecting our democratic process in the course of that assignment, then you have actually hurt and assaulted the Constitution. And so for me, I think that the president needs to really do better. Yes, he's opened, the doors for dialogue, but the parameters for that dialogue need to be clearly laid out. And I think the president and the presidency needs to understand that Nigerians have lost trust and faith in the government. And so therefore, government needs to take actions to inspire and build confidence. And I thought that the president would have used this morning's speech, to respond directly to the issues raised by the protesters.
Did you see any positive whatsoever? For example, the president has opened a line of dialogue to the to the demonstrators. Do you think that's a positive?
I think that, one of the positives from the speech, the president outlined some of the actions his government, have taken, in the last 1 year. And yes, these programs, have been implemented, are being implemented by the presidency. Now, the big question is, to what extent does the public understand and know that these programs do exist? How are those programs inclusive? How are they addressing the needs of the people? Because if you look at all the programs that the president, read out in his speech, to a large extent, for those of us who work in this space, we know that those programs exist. But how come you have this plethora of interventions, yet people are still experiencing harsh economic conditions at the local level and at different levels? Because the quality of life has not improved. The cost of commodities are still rising, and what people are bothered about. And you can see, in one of the protests, one of the images where a woman took an empty pot, to the street. And what does that symbolize? It symbolizes the fact that they do not have access to capital, to buy food, because their purchasing power has diminished in the last couple of months as a result of certain policies of government. Yes, it's one thing to say that some of these actions taken have long-term effects, but there are also actions that the government can take. The body language would demonstrate to Nigerians that this particular government at all levels, is committed to addressing this issue. What about at the state level? The president said over 500 billion, have been deployed to the states. How come we still have, this wide income or economic inequality at the state level? Somebody needs to ask those questions, and Nigerians deserve answers. That if you have all these programs and yet the quality of our life has not improved, then there's actually a problem.
But going forward, Samson, this kind of engagement, in the UK where you are at the moment, the escalation in the street protests in France, in the US, we see the fear has always been not about those who want to peacefully protest, but those who want to take advantage of it. How do we then handle, you are in the civic space, how do you handle in the moment of mobilization, how do you handle a possible escalation? And which is one of the things that the president said, and that the police had also said that there were nobody killed, none of the protesters killed by the police. In fact, the police have said about 9 of the operatives have been critically injured, and the one that was said to have been killed miraculously survived it. Now, these are big questions around anytime government hears protest and the kind of body language towards that kind of movement.
I think that there are few actions that can be taken. The first one is the president needs to acknowledge and respond to the demands that the protesters have made. And his speech does not respond directly to those. If he does that, it would inspire confidence on the part of Nigerians that he's committed to solving this problem. The second is to prevent further escalation. There are certain provocative actions that have been taken by different stakeholders. They've been sponsored anti-protest. There have been thugs who have disrupted the protesters. There've also been provocation, from security agencies who have deployed brutal force to intimidate and disperse the protesters. These kinds of actions need to be stopped. That way, it gives the protesters the confidence that government respects the constitutional right, so that when they go for dialogue, they will have confidence that the government is committed to addressing some of those issues. The third critical part, that deals with the dialogue. Who will be dialoguing with these protesters? What will be the conditions for the dialogue? But also, what will be the time frame for implementing some of the actions that have been outlined, as part of a response to the demands that the protesters have made? These are the kinds of practical steps, if taken, can address and de-escalate the tension. But lastly, is the fact that the blackmail and the intimidation of people who are innocently, legitimately protesting needs to stop. That is not how to solve.
So something, just in about 20 seconds quickly, I'd like you to respond to what Atedo Peter said. The businessman came on Twitter, on the X social media platform, and he says, one, I doff my hat to those of you who have been protesting peacefully since the 4th of August. You have shaken Nigeria to the core and dispelled the falsehood that many of our youth are not politically active and all do not care to demand good governance. I beg you in the name of God to please call off the strike now in the aftermath of the EndSARS. What do you make of it? Should the protesters call it off now for the possible occurrence or the kind of things that Atedo Peter has raised?
Well, I think the protesters will need to make that judgment call, because I'm not one of the protesters and I'm not a leader who is protesting. It's not in my place. I think it is in their place to actually, evaluate the situation and see if the president's response or speech responds to the specific needs. I think the question is not about calling off the protest. Is that there is need for dialogue and government needs to show good faith that it's committed to resolving the problems within a definite time frame.
Samson Ichodo, lawyer, civil rights activist, and the executive director of Yaga Africa. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight. Let's conclude our conversation, Mr. Kachiku. If you are clamoring that the president should reverse the decision on fuel subsidy, where would the money come from? How do you fund it?
Sure. Essentially right now, what we are doing is taking the budget for subsidy and using that budget for social schemes. We saw what happened in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. That money was being stolen. We are seeing what's happening in different ministries that are being stolen. So is it better for the money to be stolen by a few individuals in government or for the money to go to the masses?
It's always been stolen also by some other cabals that you have mentioned.
That is why.
Although you have refused to mention their names, but you know them.
What I'm saying concerning the cabals is that it's an open secret.
But you know them. Do you know them?
It's an open secret to all Nigerians. You have talked about the cabal extensively for a long time. We all know who these people are. Government should go after these people. I want to also speak to what Atedo Peter said. The reality is that the security agents have a very, very, very tough task. If you watch what happened in Kano, if you had let those protesters, if you didn't curtail those protesters, they will have run over the government house in Kano or the government house in Kaduna. So it's a very, very, very difficult task. We understand that there's legitimate need for the protest, but we also know that this is Nigeria where politics is being fused with legitimate demands.
Are you worried about the flags of Russia that we're seeing that they're carrying around?
What you will see is that politics has come in. You have some people who are using this, and with the Dangote NNPC situation, calling for the removal of the GC of NNPC. That's politics. You have people bringing flag of Russia who are saying essentially, if there's a coup in the region, why not a coup here? That's politics. So we now see why is the presidency afraid that people want to truncate our democracy through the back door? If they lost out in the elections, that they are now coming through the back door, through this protest, to say this government will not stand. But this president, like I always say, made a mistake. As president of Nigeria, his first defining task after such a rancorous election should have been to unite all Nigerians around the common charter.
Does he still have the opportunity or the window to do that?
Tell you something, I keep on saying, President Bola Tinubu is a smart president. Trust me on this. He's a very smart president, smarter than the other old fogies. So I know he has what it takes to do what needs to be done, but he needs to get rid of the Emilokon tendency in him. He knows what to do, and he can do it, and he can still do it. I trust and I pray God that he will do right by Nigerians. I still believe that his presidency will succeed if he does the right thing.
You think for the peace of Nigeria, the protest should end?
Absolutely. This protest must end yesterday, not today.
On a final note, the state governments are those who are receiving more of what should have been subsidy. Why is the attention not on the state governors and the government on how they spend this money?
That is what the media ought to be doing, educating the citizenry. We have this unhealthy focus on the center, whereas the people are residents in the localities where the governors and local government chairmen are presiding, and where they've been getting stupendous income in the last 1 year, and a lot of them are doing nothing. We should ask questions of these people. You saw the recent Supreme Court ruling concerning their funding and what have you. People should start asking questions of these people. People should start understand that power starts from the local government level, and ask them what are they doing with their funding at that level.
Dumabi Kachuku was the presidential candidate of the ADC in the 2023 election. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight. I appreciate your thoughts. We'll take a break, and when we come back, Senator Kyari, who is the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, will be joining me next. That is a major problem in the mix of things: food prices, food inflation, and how much of feeding that people can get in the face of the dwindling purchasing power. We'll be speaking with the man who is in charge of making food available for Nigeria. Senator Kyari will be joining me next on the program. Stay with us. We'll be right back, everyone. Thanks so much, everyone. Welcome back to the conversation. Tonight, we are being joined by Nigeria's Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Senator Abubakar Kyari, to discuss the pressing issues of rising food costs, escalating food inflation, and the perceived food shortages that have gripped the nation. These challenges have been major catalysts for the recent street protests that we see in Nigeria in the last 4 days, as citizens now voice their concerns over the high cost of living, deteriorating living conditions, and their struggle to feed their families. Minister Kyari, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Things are really getting to a concerning stage. Nigeria's inflation had gotten to a 28-year high. Food inflation has never been has never gotten to this point in the last 20 years. And someone will be wondering, under your watch, what really went wrong?
Well, we're just starting to see the effects of what has happened in the past. I wouldn't want to start blaming what has happened in the past, but there is certain factors that have created the challenges that we face now. Production levels are low in terms of agricultural production.
We are not producing.
We're not producing
as much as our consumption.
We're not catching up with the population growth. Nigeria grew 5.4 million last year. We're not catching up with that population. So that's another factor.
So in 1 year, we've had how many millions of people?
It's not only 1 year. It's not only 1 year.
We are reviewing
it's been all the losses of production has happened within for the past 15 years.
What happened to our storage silos? What happened to them? I thought over the last government said we have food banks where We have grains in storage. What happened to that? They've been depleted.
What we met was 53,000 tons of assorted grains. And that's, I've said it several times. And that was when we distributed, by Mr. President's directive, to distribute 42,000 metric tons from the strategic reserve.
But that is supposed to impact, isn't it, on the price of the commodities? But as much as 40,000 tons, that's quite a awful lot. But then the prices have not changed yet. Instead, the prices were soaring.
Let me say something, Sean. The challenges are there. They have been there. We have climate change and, issues to do with input costs. That has happened within the last, recent times. And then, of course, we've had only one harvest. This government has only experienced one harvest, which is like the dry season harvest, which we have done considerably well, much more than what has happened in the past. Even in the wet season, the one that we just met as a government, had a marginal increase over what was harvested in 2022. And it's there, the records are there, the data is there, produced by the Nigerian Agricultural Extension Research Liaison Services, NILS. And it's there. But for a fact, that what I'm saying is that the population explosion, we have not been able to keep up with the kind of the explosive nature and even the shrinkage of the land mass for agriculture. Land is shrinking for agriculture. Flooding is there, habitation is there, insecurity is there. So when you look at the land available for cultivation has been shrinking over the period and over the time. And even farmer population, look at the aging farmer population, for instance, where we have younger people are not going into agriculture now. So when you look at all these factors that have really cut down on production. But I'll say something here, Sean, and maybe for the information for the public. The Ministry of Agriculture takes responsibility for what has happened. However, I would also look at it from the other point of view, that the states also have their own departments or ministries of agriculture. Even the local governments have departments of agriculture. So it's at the three, tiers of government that have responsibility towards what is happening, the challenges that we face now.
When you say you take responsibility, which is supposed to be a reasonable thing any government or anyone who is in charge of anything should do anyways if there are failings. But what would you say is your major failing that cost us these rising food inflation?
Well, like I said, look at mechanization, for instance. Mr. President has just announced today in his address on the issue of the mechanization programs that we've lined up. We have 4 right now in place, and 3 have passed through Federal Executive Council, and 1 is in the process. Now, the basic implement today in agriculture today in Nigeria is a hoe, and that's an archaic and an antique implement, because there's no any industry in this wide world that even manufactures a hoe. So when you look at it, it's that we're still in the back ages using hoe. That's why the mechanization program has.
Let's summarize this for the average person to understand tonight. There was a time that were touted to be food sufficient in terms of rice, and that they say, oh, we do not need the reliance on importation any longer. Yeah. Can you give us a figure? How many tons of rice, millions of tons of rice, do we consume yearly in Nigeria today?
Well, about 9.5 million tons.
And we're said to be producing just about 7 million.
About 8.5 something.
So we have a shortage of about 2 million.
No, not up to 2 million. It's less than 1 million.
That we have
the shortage.
So how do we
about
balance
900,000?
So where do we get it from? It's importation, isn't it?
Not deliberate importation, but maybe smuggled rice. We all know that rice has been smuggled in the past. But that is not to say that there is. But when you look at the global, in terms of food consumption, we produce almost 200 million tons of food in Nigeria. 60 billion is cassava, 40 million is yams. That's half of it. So, but when you look at grains, it's where we have the challenges, especially maize, where maize now we have, there's a competition between animal feed and also for human consumption.
Now, so the question now is that the reality is that we are not self-sufficient in our food production. That's the reality.
Well, you know, when we started, we looked at, of course, Mr. President had already identified that when he declared emergency on food security. And even when he appointed us as minister, myself and my colleague, Senator Aliu Sabi Abdullahi, he renamed the ministry from Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development to Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. And that's for emphasis, to show that there is a deliberate attempt to make sure that the security, the food challenges that we're facing, we need to tackle those. And that's why there's a lot of emphasis on production and emphasis on, we thought it was the affordability issue at that time when food inflation was rising. But as we went along, we looked at it and saw the availability issue creeping in. I'll give you an example. In September, a lot of people have approached me to say, look, import rice, because you won't have rice for Christmas. Christmas came and gone, and then there was rice. No, there was no complaint about rice. Same thing, Easter is coming, Ramadan is coming, there won't be rice, but there was rice. As I'm talking to you, we still have rice in the market, but the issue of the affordability is there, and that's because supply and demand has started taking shape. So when there's low supply and high demand, and like I said, Nigeria is growing rapidly. You won't understand. I mean, look at the population explosion in the urban areas now. We're expected to reach about 400 million by the year 2050. 2050 is only 26 years
so
old.
We have a big population, but yet we are not able to feed ourselves.
Well, we're not keeping up with
so our production is lower than our population growth.
The rate of production is lower than the rate of population growth.
So would you say that we have food insecurity at the moment?
We have food challenges, yes.
So in the real sense, the food that we have in the market at the moment isn't what is causing the food price, the price of the commodity. Is it that we have shortage at the moment, which is making the prices go up, or what exactly? Because if you say there's a pump in some food, you release food into the market, yet the prices are still going up.
Well, you know, let me say something as well. Where food is produced is not necessarily where it's processed. Where it's processed is not necessarily where it's consumed. So there are steps that you go through, and at all these steps, there are issues. Infrastructure, for instance, is an issue. Road infrastructure, even farm infrastructure is an issue. And this is what Mr. President seeks to achieve and address those challenges.
Now, when we look at how things have spiraled, well, it doesn't look like this government has been able to turn back the wave in which things are going. It's spiraling and fast. Just in 1 year of this administration, things have gone so berserk.
Yeah. Well, let me say something. Let me say something. If you're trying to build a two-story house, for instance, you do a very low foundation, right? But if you want to build a 50-story building, then the foundation will be deep. And by the time it will take for that foundation, for the two-story house, you see it, quickly. So what Mr. President is trying to do here is giving us directive that we need to do what is right. We need to, one, mechanize, look at those, and then involve the private sector.
Have you done that? Have you started mechanization?
We have ordered. I mean, it's not like chewing gum, you don't buy it off the shelf, right? So you have to make an order. And I went to even Minsk, I went to Belarus, I went to the factory where we ordered for 2,000 tractors and 9,000 other implements. Trailers, plows, harrows, planters, boom sprayers, about 9,000 pieces of them. And I went there and I saw them in production with 10 330 horsepower.
When are they due to be
well,
to
we have any more. They have produced about 500 now, and within the next 30, 60 days, I believe they will be here. So.
I was very happy with the kind of collaboration I saw with some state governments and initiatives that some state governments were making. Kebbi State, for example, and Lagos State with the lake rice. And you will see some states taking initiative. You see what Governor Bago in Niger State, what he is doing.
Yes.
But the question is that there are those who will say we have lost our identity as a nation. In years around when I was born, we could be proud to say cassava, cocoa, and palm oil. These are some of the produce that Nigeria, you mentioned the name of this country, we are second, third producers across the globe. But again today, what can Nigeria say, or what would the Tinubu government say it can bequeath to the rest of the world in terms of agri-produce?
Well, cassava, we're on top there. In fact, right now, as I'm speaking, we have a team that is going to unbundle the cassava season with a lot of intervention from the frontline states of cassava in the southeast and the north central and the southwest. We are getting in touch with one of the largest outgrowers of cassava, a lady named Yemisi out of Ogun State, Oyo State, which has a robust processing and a robust outgrower scheme of cassava. And we're working also with Harvest Plus and IITA. We've spoken with them, and we are going to roll out within the next 2 weeks. Because we're starting to plant the cassava stems in the south in about 2 weeks' time, in the south in about by end of August, first week September. So cassava is really huge. Yam is also we're number one in the world.
Ethanol you can derive from
You can
cassava.
do ethanol, you can do sorbitol, you can do starch, you can do, and then edible cassava is
and
also...
you get FX from there. I mean,
yes,
if you are able to export them.
Precisely.
But I mean, that's another problem, exportation. There was a time that this nation wanted, under the Buhari government, wanted to export yam tubers. But when it gets to where the destination, those yams were spoiled. They were bad. So we're getting something right, but we're getting the other end of the chain wrong.
Yeah, there are a lot of issues along the chain, infrastructure, even port infrastructure. So we need to look into those things and see how we can fix it. Way of doing things properly, taking care of the yam. The yam that is going out of Ghana is from Nigeria. And all they do is they sit down and clean each one of it and package it very well and send it out.
Unfortunately, a tuber of yam sells over 6,000 naira as of today in Abuja.
Well, it has come down, though. We appreciate that, right?
As of Friday, the current price in the market, Minister, and I will be glad if you
I know from Jos, we have...
As the Minister of Agri, maybe you have some tuber of yams. Yam is gold now. If you have some tuber of yam, I will be glad to collect and cook tonight. I mean, we have food prices in the commodity as of Friday last week, this week or last week, because we're in the weekend.
Well, the new yam has come out and is gradually coming down. That for a fact, I can send you some facts on that. Potato is also coming down. Tomato is coming down. But within the last 2 days, because of the protests, I learned that in the south, tomatoes are rising back up again.
Look at, I mean, I'm afraid you might not be able to see details of it, but incrementally, Minister, prices of commodities, largely food, the question will be, how do you want to bring this down? And how soon can this be done?
Well,
so look at it.
Yeah.
So you look at the ones that concern you directly. This is a comparison between 1 year ago, Minister, and as of today. Look at rice, 50 kg. We understand that the president has ordered that they should reduce manually the price of rice to about 40,000. That's what I understand. It used to sell as 55,000 1 year ago, selling about 85,000 in the market. Beans, one model, as popularly called in local parlance, 2,000 it used to sell, is selling about almost 100% higher in price. Yam tuber, 6,000, like I told you, is to sell 1,000. Eggs, 80 naira, 200 naira is being sold for one. Roasted corn that we love to eat, 100 naira used to sell, double the price now. Sugar, 38,000 1 year ago, 81,000. And I mean,
I wish you would have percentages on the side so that you could see exactly.
Yeah, all the percentages are almost 100%. They are doubled in prices.
Well, 55,000 should have been 110,000 for rice. So it's 85,000 if it's 100%.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that
things are still bad.
Did I not admit that they are bad?
But how do you want to turn?
So
this
what we're saying is
around?
Production. We need to increase production. It's a case of supply and demand. And let me also say something. The seasons that we find ourselves now, it's a cyclical issue that you have in agriculture. This is what is called the lean season, and this is between June, July, and August, before the next harvest. And that is why Mr. President has decided to import rice, maize, wheat, those staple foods, sorghum.
It has been imported now.
No, it's been, I mean, he opened it up today. He mentioned it in his speech, right?
When are we expected to receive those importation?
Well, as soon as all the fiscal issues have worked out, and then Ministry of Finance and Customs have issued out the fiscal aspect of it, and I think.
In your estimation, Minister, if those produce are brought into the country, how impactful will it be on the price of commodities?
Well, like I said, availability also impacts on price.
But when you have it flooded, if you flood the commodities in the market, naturally the principle of supply and demand should play, and it should crash the price.
Precisely.
But that has not been happening, Minister. And
no,
this
but
is exactly my point.
It hasn't been imported.
No,
yet.
I'm saying that there are some food prices. When you release over 40,000 tons of grains, it didn't affect the prices.
Do you know the kind of importation levels we're talking about? It's almost about 300,000-400,000 metric tons per month for all the 4 and 5 crops.
For how long will this go?
Only till harvest.
Okay. And this
that's
we're
why
talking about March
just a
next
short.
Year or
No. It's about October, November this year. That's when we're going to have the harvest.
So we are expecting that.
And we're expecting a bumper harvest.
Hopefully, bumper harvest.
Yes. Barring any other natural issues.
God forbid.
God forbid.
So, say for example, we should be buying yam as less as 2,000 naira when we have a bumper harvest. Or rice as low as 35,000 naira if we have a bumper harvest.
If we have a bumper harvest,
Are you giving me an assurance tonight, Minister?
Well, I'm just giving you the assurance that there will be a bumper harvest. And let me say something. There are other factors as well, in terms of what determines price as well. We have a lot of deficit in the infrastructure of road infrastructure for farmlands, for instance. Access to credit, for instance. And that's why right now the National Council of Privatization has directed the restructuring and recapitalization of Bank of Agriculture. That's to provide credit to smallholder farmers and even large-scale private sector. Even the private sector is not even aware that there's some of these facilities available for them to enhance their production. Insurance, for instance. Like what we see, issues of flooding and other climate change issues. Insurance is one aspect that under the ministry we have the Nigeria Agricultural Insurance Corporation, which gives premium at 50% what the other commercial insurance companies give. Now,
are you worried about a narrative or a perspective to this, that if it's not because we have an extreme food shortage problem, and yet there is an impact so much on price, even when we're not producing as much, the prices didn't escalate or soar this bad. Are you worried about a possible manipulation by some forces in the market?
Let me say something. Let me also say something. A lot of rural communities that are into, agrarian rural communities don't have financial institutions in their areas, right? And agricultural commodities are used as a store of value. Whether you call it hoarding or whether you call it by whatever name, in the local areas, you would find families keeping agricultural commodities as a store of value. So whenever their need arises, festivities for weddings and whenever the need arises, they take out 10 bags and sell it off just to cover their needs, right? So those are there. They're in multiple. So they're there all over the place. But there are big hoarders as well at the same time. Last time we have experienced those ones in Kano, for instance, that the government went around looking and were able to see some warehouses locked up with grains inside. So
have those persons been prosecuted?
Yes, I think they have been, because it's under the Kano state government. I think they have been.
Because people and those grains that are supposed to be distributed, we see that people are rebagging and reselling and selling. So there is a loss of trust that those food items that the government said they should go out, some people to the average citizen, some people are circumventing the process and taking them to a profit advantage.
Well, that's some of the issues that I keep talking about. There's a human factor as well. So which, where does the federal government or Mr. President, Mr. President has directed that these, palliatives should be given out free of charge, and then somebody turns around to rebags and sells it. What else can you say about that? These are the things that we're looking at, and it's sad. Like now, the ones that Mr. President has directed that it should be sold at 40,000 will go to, especially in the first instance here, will go to the public servants, where you have proper data, you have NIN, and where once you buy at that, you won't come back to buy again.
So you have created a system of even and fair distribution.
Well, no, that's just for that. Like I said,
for the 40,000 naira, yeah.
For the 40,000, so for the ones.
So civil servants will be prioritized.
Well, it's out there. I think it's out there in the domain. There's a public servants, right? So for the first instance, and then there will be others that will be sent to the states as well. So it's not an issue of you must give it to somebody. I mean, whether you now, if you say you're going to decide like this one is the first instance for the civil servants.
There are those who are saying, why is the federal government not pegging the price of these commodities, or especially food? Is it possible?
We have such a system that it's very difficult to monitor. How do you monitor? If you peg a price and if it's not available, what does it mean?
So it's availability that is the issue here.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
But the little that are available, there are those who are taking chances, an advantage of a possible a perceived shortage.
There is another aspect that we're looking at. Yes, there's another aspect that we're looking at in this cultivation. This, like I said, this is the first time we're doing the major rice cultivation, for instance. We're looking at costs of production. Try to see what is the fair price at the end of the day. So once you do that and you can come up with those cost structures, then you can actually, say, look, prices shouldn't be more than this.
So federal government is now looking at fixing the prices, at least for this crisis period.
These are issues that we will look into, but we're looking at commodity boards, commodity exchanges, in trying to regulate prices. But there's another aspect that we're trying to do now because of the importation that we're doing, the guaranteed minimum price for farmers, because we don't want to, discourage farmers from cultivating, because once they hear there's going to be importation, it's going to affect production, right? So we're also going to have a system where we're going to have a guaranteed minimum price for the farmers. We're going to have surplus offtake from the farmers so that we put it into the strategic reserve.
Minister, I'd like to take you to task on two things quickly before we go. Has this government, or does this government have a plan of what produce it wants to be known to bequeath to the world, which was one of the things that I mentioned earlier. And as you mentioned, some countries of the world, you can easily tell what is synonymous to that country in terms of food production. Maybe you have three produce. Does this government even have that plan at all?
Yeah. Soya is one.
We want to be a big soya
big one. Yeah, Nigeria is well known for good soya.
No, but what I'm saying is that in terms of the entire value chain, from production to processing and to exportation, does the Tinubu government have a plan in terms of what it wants to give to produce for Nigeria first and give to the rest of the world? We used to be known for our groundnut pyramids. We used to be known for cocoa in the south. We used to be, the north produces or produced those days materials, cotton, for the textile industry.
Well, I think let's look at it.
So the question is that what are we going to be known for, Minister?
Well, let's be self-sufficient in trying to feed the country.
Fix our crisis
Yes,
first.
But it's not bad for you to aim high, because once you aim high, you say you want to export this item, then it means you must be self-sufficient before it goes to export. But we have been looking everywhere, and we're trying to see how we can incentivize the farmer, give credit to the farmer, incentivize private sector. This thing has to be private sector driven, and private sector would choose what they want to do.
In the last 1 year, Minister, how many farmers in the private sector has this government created?
Oh, I would say quite a bit, because we have impacted a lot on terms of input support. We have done a lot of fertilization. We did herbicides, insecticides, variety of inputs. And even now, like I said, we're trying to do at least nothing less than 50 to 60,000 hectares of cassava within this planting season. So we're mainly going to use private sector.
Minister, on a final note, just in 30 seconds, can you look into the camera and promise Nigerians, tell Nigerians that so and so month, you promise that Nigerians will start feeling the effort of this government? We want to know, because there's a fixed amount of salary that Nigerians get, but they cannot use it to buy food.
Like I said, we have already started feeling the impact. The impact of, like I said, go and see, tomato has come down. Potato has come down.
So you are saying by Christmas, majorly food prices would have crashed?
I would come here with you and you show me that table again.
That's a promise.
That's a promise.
And I wish you the very best,
Thank you very
and
much.
your colleagues.
There's
been a hardship in the land.
Yes.
But if you are giving us this hope and these assurances,
we are determined. We are determined to achieve.
We will hold you by your babariga, Minister.
Yes, it's quite big for you to take your.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Senator Abubakar Kyari is the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll take a break, everyone. There are hopes. Well, it's a matter of patience. If you can wait to see some of them, but we will keep this government on their toes to ensure that we get the benefit of their promises. When we return, I'll get a security expert to tell us the implications of what we saw on the street of Nigeria, how we can store this kind of occurrences, and some of what the president said, and of course what the police is saying. We give you all of the statistics. 681 people are now behind bars in the last 4 days. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. The police have been talking about the situation in respect of the protesters. 681 persons. That's the number of people that may now be in custody. And the police is saying that they are investigating what really went wrong. 9 police officers may have been injured, and there was a scare that one of them may have died. But there are other incidents that have happened in the last 4 days since this protest began. Let's get some perspectives to this, because it's concerning, isn't it? The world also monitor what is happening in the UK. There are protests there, and it has happened over the last 2 days. But in Nigeria, where you have an escalation of some of these issues, really culminating into burning and destroying government, private properties, that it calls for a lot of rethinking about the manner in which security agencies handle this kind of situation. I'm being joined by Dr. Kabiru Adamu, who is a security expert. Thank you so much, Dr. Adamu, for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Good evening, Sean.
Security-wise, how do you assess the protest in the last 4 days?
I think the most important thing is to remind ourselves that the protests are happening within the context of the security situation in Nigeria. We should also remind ourselves that within the State Fragility Index, Nigeria still occupies a very precarious stage. At the last time I checked, we were at number 15 globally. That means of all the over 200 countries in the world, we are the 15th most fragile states. And what are the reasons that make our fragility obvious? Number one, the inability of state institutions to maintain law and order, as an example. The existence of non-state armed groups that are challenging the supremacy of the use of force by the state. Sometimes the alleged heavy-handedness of our security forces, proliferation of small arms and light weapons and things like that. So it is in that environment that the protests, are taking place. I think it's also important to mention the outcome of the 2023 elections. There are still a significant number of politicians who are aggrieved, are not happy with the outcome of that election, both at the federal level and then at the state level, especially in core states like Kano, the Rivers State, and a few other states where the incumbent and a few other persons who lost, sometimes within the same party, are also unhappy about that. Then the economic circumstances that the country is in at the moment. Of course, the cost of living crisis, which has been well documented. And then, of course, the environmental issues that are happening, the climate change. So this is the environment in which the protest is happening. Now, all of these factors will either support or in some instances take advantage of gaps that are created by the protest. I didn't mention the geopolitical component. I'm sure you've seen in some parts of Kano where Russian flags are being waved.
What does that mean, though?
It's a geopolitical consequence of the coup in Niger. After the coup in Niger, you saw the same thing happening, the popularity of the junta, and then Russia playing a role. Almost out of nowhere, Russian flags emerged, and they became part of that coup cycle. Now, a lot of youths in the northern part of the country were watching that. And there is a chatter, and I'm using my word carefully, that the ruling junta in Niger, which is CNSP, is also taking advantage of this the gaps that have been created by the protest. So all of these are the issues that are playing out. The protesters may have a genuine intention, but they don't have the capacity to manage all of these complexities. Unfortunately, too, the state, enough notice was given to the state that the protest was going to happen. And if I'm going to assess the action of the state in managing that, I would say the state also failed to prevent all of these factors that I've mentioned.
You mean the federating units, the state government?
The federal,
the state,
the Nigerian state. Because there was enough time. We knew that those protests was going to happen. And there are persons who have responsibility.
Well, I mean, the government for almost a week or more was expressing this fear about this protest. And those are saying, why is the government not let them protest? But that the government will come out to say, look, see what we told you was going to happen, that this was going to escalate so badly. I mean, so if you look at it, is the federal government right about its fears about a possible, not particularly about the innocent Nigerians who were genuinely agitated about the state of affairs in the country, but those who wanted to take advantage of it?
Like I explained to you, there are different forces that are at play. I wouldn't use the word take advantage. They are already there. They are waiting for gaps. Those gaps opened up, and then they stepped in. Now, the state, by virtue of Section 14, subsection 2 of the Constitution, has the responsibility to provide security. If you extend it to the social contract, which also says that we've let go of certain of our rights, and the state has the responsibility. And so to that extent, I do not think it's right to point a finger and say, we said it's going to happen. Now, why didn't you arrest anyone? Why didn't you prevent those threat elements who are challenging the supremacy of use of force by the state? So that excuse, I honestly don't buy it.
I mean, all of these outcome and the fallout that we've seen, do they in any way, just as some people feared, raise any concern about illegitimate means of wanting to topple the government?
To an extent, yes. I started by talking about the 2023 elections and the outcome of 2023 elections. Anyone who is doing an analysis of Nigeria and does not take that into consideration would likely fail. It is a vibrant force. It is a force that is even playing out. If you picked the papers yesterday and today, which I'm sure you did, you've seen politicians making statements. In fact, one of them called on the International Court of Justice to come in, and because of the alleged killings of Nigerians. So that's a factor. Several politicians, in fact, even within the ruling All Progressive Congress, are unhappy and would take advantage of opportunities like this to show the weakness of the government.
In the manner in which Russia has been blamed, Russia looks like the ghetto gangster that everyone in the community always want to blame for anything that happens. Democratically speaking, American government had blamed Russia for infiltrating his democratic space at some elections and influencing the elections. And there are those who are also thinking that Russia is trying to find a way of infiltrating the African political space, and they fear the implication of the Ukraine-Russian war, and those who are aligned or do not align, and that those who are thinking that it does look like Russia wants to pose itself as a global political force as against what we are seeing in the establishment, the United States, the United Kingdom, China, and the rest, and they wanted to put their mark in the global political stage. And when you see those flags, those Russian flags, in some part of the country being raised, and they're in their numbers, not one or two of them, do you think that the intelligence community needs to then now critically be looking at the possibility for an external influence in our politics and democracy?
If they are not doing that, then it's a shame and it's unfortunate.
So it's not a local trouble alone. We might be having on our hands a trouble or a crisis of an international dimension.
Definitely. We started having we're the beautiful bright. The resources at our disposal makes us the beautiful bright. And there are several countries that are interested in shaping the outcome of a lot of things in Nigeria. And of course, by doing that, having stake within the country. Russia is one of them, China, and then all the Western powers are also at play. Now, unfortunately, our ability as a state to determine our interest and project that interest in a manner, because the truth of it is we're a member of the Global Committee of Nations. We're a player, and so we can't isolate ourselves. We need those players. But what most countries do is to determine their course and then let the other countries come in. I had cause recently to ask some people within the intelligence community, what is the strength of our counter intelligence or counter espionage functions in Nigeria? Sheun, that's a question that is yet to be answered. And so Russia is there, it's playing a huge role. All the other countries that I mentioned are playing huge roles. China, which has more or less embedded itself within a lot of our functions, is also playing a huge role. And all of these countries are here with their interest. If we allow their interest to be projected, then unfortunately we are at their mercy. And sadly, that is what I'm seeing at the moment. They are determining outcomes with very little influence from our side. You can't stop them because, yes, like I said, we're a global part of the Global Committee of Nations, but we can make it extremely difficult for them. And in doing that, make sure our interest is not just projected, but it is our interest that is seen and that it is respected. We're not doing very well at this.
This is probably one of the protests that we're seeing on the global stage, on the national stage, that from the beginning, the issue of military takeover, insurgent infiltration of government, and a possibility of toppling of a government is coming in. What do you think is responsible for this narrative that is cropping up? either true or false?
I think, unfortunately, and the good thing is you just interviewed the Minister of Agriculture. Food affordability is a challenge in Nigeria. And when you allow a man to reach a stage where to even feed himself becomes difficult, then his humanity is put at a stage where he can do so many things, sometimes even without his conscience. And I think, sadly, that is where we are at the moment. What I see happening in parts of Nigeria where the Russian flag is being waved, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda, especially on the social media space, where we're not doing very well to counter. And because we're not doing very well, the persons at the end are grabbing. And when they grab, they project it with associations like that. But I don't see any genuine indicator that would tell me, for instance, that there are forces at play behind what we're seeing. If we allow it to fester, then those forces can step in, just like I said at the beginning.
But there are those who say within the sub-region, there are at least 2-3 countries that the military junta has now held sway, and nothing has happened.
Exactly.
Nothing has. In fact, the matter being that they are now very popular with a huge percentage of the population of those countries, and there are those who will say there are copycatism in politics of the world. Whatever you see happening, and we've seen it play out in Africa a lot of the time. You look at how many countries got independence around the same time. Is when one country gets it, another country, it becomes a popular and something that people copy and paste it within their own region. And there are those who will say, if in fact these countries that the military had a takeover, they became the bride of the leadership of the sub-region. It tells something. Could this be also a factor to encourage this kind of
definitely
this kind of nonsense? Because anybody thinking about a military takeover, as far as I'm concerned, is a nonsense.
And I think the beauty of it is immediately after the last coup, which was in Niger. And of course, our president was sworn in as the chairman of ECOWAS. He reiterated this point. If I remember well, he made mention that this will be the last time there will be a military coup in the sub-region. And then, of course, the rest, of course, is history. Unfortunately, however, we haven't seen much of action followed up by that declaration. Like you rightly pointed, more than a year into the Nigerian coup, they've still not announced the transition plan. Mali is still being ruled by a military junta. Burkina Faso is still there. Guinea is still there. So that, unfortunately, has the potential of affecting other parts of the region. The circumstances in Nigeria are completely different. It will be very difficult, really, for what played out in those countries to play out in Nigeria. But I think it's a warning to anyone who before now felt that there is no influence in terms of the geopolitical developments in Nigeria. This is a wake-up call to remind us, especially our intelligence community, to remind us that happenings in the sub-region do have an impact in Nigeria, especially in these circumstances where, like I said earlier on, they are grabbing. They are looking for some form of leadership, and anything that comes their way, they will grab.
Take a look at what Atado Peterside, for example, said. He said, let these protests end today, Sunday. Whether or not that will be yielded on, the president in his broadcast made it explicitly clear. I've heard you loud and clear. Go back home, return to your homes, and let the line of dialogue be opened. And that those who will say beyond the rhetorics of go back home is also the fact that those who are behind the protest should also be aware of the security implication of that. Do you think?
In my honest opinion, and based on the assessment that I did, I think they are aware of the consequences. What has not been put forward to them is what they are going to get in return. They put out some demands, and like we all know, in such circumstances, there are the latent demands, and then there are the hidden demands. Now, what I would have expected over time, since this protest started, the idea of the protest started a couple of weeks back, what I would have expected is our intelligence cycle should have, beyond determining the obvious stated objectives, demands, what are the other latent demands, so that some form of compromise, engagement can be done. I do not think at the moment, given all that has happened and given the type of attention that they've been able to generate, which inadvertently was actually given to them by the government because of the way they gave the protest and then went about engaging and giving it a lot of media coverage where we are. So I do not see them heeding to these calls. What I hope to see is some form of compromise, especially the validation of their request. If they're saying food is expensive, if they're saying they can't afford health, if they're saying they want an increase in wage, they're talking about the National Assembly, at least let's validate those requests. Call for dialogue, just like the president has called for dialogue, and then come out with tangible ways on how you are going to be done. We've listened to the president. He's reeled out several policies, but the challenge is this, Shehu, and I heard you talking to the minister about that. In terms of what we're seeing on ground, the impact is not being felt. Food is still extremely expensive. Right. Health is not affordable to the average Nigerian. And that's where the crux of the matter is. Until people on the street who are protesting are able to see those tangible changes, then there's nothing you're going to tell them.
I mean, the implication is what the security agencies did or did not do, or what they did wrong. See what Professor Wole Soyinka has said. He's condemned, he's criticized the manner in which, according to him, lethal treatment being given to the protests. What do you make of that scenario?
I mean, the Prof's statement, I would want to remind every listener that we are not where we were. Progress has been made, but yet we are not where we want to be in terms of the equipment repository at the disposal of our security forces. And because we're deploying them in that manner, there will be casualties. But when you look at the overall casualties, I think they've done very well. But of course, we need to improve from there. I'll give you an example. In Kano, I saw videos of military men who went in aid of a particular warehouse that was being raided. And they were able to gather, I think it was granite oil or whatever it was in jerry cans, and then sacks of rice. Some of the hoodlums followed them and were taking those items from the vehicle. Those guys were armed. In the past, they will use their weapon. They didn't in this instance. And we've seen several instances of our security forces being injured. So I think their approach so far has been measured, and they deserve commendation for those extent of measurement. But the onus is on us to make sure we equip them. Shehu, in Protest 2.0, which is what we're dealing with, if anybody thinks that's not what we're dealing with Protest 2.0.
What does that mean?
It means it's modern-day protest that has various factors at play. Some of the sponsors are not even in Nigeria. They're outside the world. Some of the sponsors are using the cyberspace, both the open one and the dark web, to carry on what they're doing. And we do not have the capacity and capability to manage it. So we need to arm our security forces with the requisite equipment to be able to manage such protests with the least fatalities. And I think so far they've done quite well with the equipment that they're disposing.
About 4 or 5 states declared curfew, and those states were in the north. You see relative peace within the southern region of the country.
Apart from the Delta State.
But usually you see more of the marching and the protest and the demonstration in southern Nigeria. But this time around, things became, I mean, you saw the agitation more in the north. Is this also political in nature?
So all the factors I mentioned earlier on played out more in the north. The consequence or the outcome of 2023 elections, the poverty level, and then another factor that also played, and I think inadvertently the federal government played into that. Just before the protest, there was a lot of chatter within the northern part of the country that ulamas, senior clerics had been given money to dissuade voters. So their ability to calm the people now is lost almost completely. Traditional rulers too lost that ability.
And then Zanga, which does not literally mean a peaceful marching. It does look like a riotous gathering.
Zanga to that extent. I mean, you also have to remember, there are, like I said, there are so many things at play. It's Islam, at least the way I understand it, does not encourage protest. So traditionally, a northern Muslim who understands who is a Muslim should not even protest in that manner. And there are reasons for that. It's not within the remit of the conversation.
I have just about 60 seconds to close, but let me show you this, and you have about 30 seconds to please help me make sense of it. You look at the list that the police have said, 681 Those are the number of arrests, and they stated it in the days they did all of that. And the police are saying 9 police officers sustained various degrees of injuries. And that narrative of police killing, because the police had come out to say that's not true. They mentioned an incident in Kebbi where they said one local government, local vigilante man shot and killed one of the looters. And also in Borno, said about 2 incidents. The IED, which they seem to have linked into an ISWAP or a Boko Haram attack, and an incident of 2 civilians being killed. And police say, look, they've tried as much as possible to be civil. Can you wrap up for us on these 3 in 30 seconds?
Yes. The truth of it is more people died than what the police is saying. We were able to document, as at the second day of the protest, 21 people dying. Who killed them is what we don't know, because unfortunately there are weapons at the disposal of all the actors that I've mentioned. Only a forensic investigation would determine who died. But I'm quite delighted that for one of the few times in our history, the police has come out with figure documenting what happened. And I think the onus is on, especially those of us outside, to determine whether what the police reeled out is the fact or not. But more people died than what was that. Who killed them is what we don't know.
Kabir Adamu is a security expert. Thank you so much for indeed coming to speak on this matter and give perspectives to it. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Well, today is an extended edition of the program for obvious reasons. But thank you so much, everyone, for watching tonight. I'm Sean Wakimale. I'll see you next time. God bless Nigeria.